Hey, everybody. Welcome to another fantastic episode of The Thoughtful Bro. I'm so happy to have David Baldacci here. This is going to be quite an interview. It's one of these interviews that I love doing, which isn't just about the book he's just written, but is sort of like a broader discussion about his life and his work and his career and his MasterClass. I'm so excited to share all this stuff with you. We're really going to get into it today. But first, a few words to get started. We on The Thoughtful Bro, as always, are streaming on A Mighty Blaze, on Facebook and YouTube. We are here, as always, to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. A Mighty Blaze, for those who might not have heard of us, we're an all-volunteer initiative connecting writers and readers virtually. We've been doing it since the pandemic, and we're still going strong. At A Mighty Blaze, we're never asking for money. We are an all-volunteer initiative, as I said, and if you want to show us the love or support, just follow us, like us, retweet us, repost us, tell your friends about us. But if you are in the mood to spend money, I have an idea for you. You could spend it on books about war, humanity, and survival during the London Blitz of World War II. Books by one of the great thriller writers of all time. Books like Strangers in Time by David Baldacci. We're going to put links in the chat to buy that on bookshop.org, supporting indie bookstores. So please go ahead, open another browser window and buy a few. Buy them for your friends, buy them for your upcoming beach trip. It's a great read, a kind of like nostalgic, big-hearted read about the World War II in London. But if you have any questions for David, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. And now, a little bit more about him. David Baldacci published his first novel, Absolute Power, in 1996. It became a movie directed by and starring Clint Eastwood. In total, over the past 30 years, David has published 52 novels for adults. All of them have been national and international bestsellers, and several have been adapted for film and television. His novels are published in over 45 languages and more than 80 countries, with 150 million copies sold. David has also published seven novels for young readers. He's a lifelong Virginian. He received his bachelor's degree from VCU and his law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law, after which he practiced law in Washington, D.C., before departing to chase his dream of being a writer. He is a devoted philanthropist. His greatest efforts are dedicated to his family's Wish You Well Foundation, which supports family and adult literacy programs in the U.S., and also his Feeding Body and Mind Foundation. And through that, more than 1 million new and gently used books have been collected and distributed to food banks and families in need. His latest book, as I said, is called Strangers in Time. It's a World War II novel, which Mitch Albom calls a riveting story of secrets, betrayals, and unlikely friendships during World War II, an emotional web that keeps spinning and keeps you guessing right till the startling finish. David Baldacci, welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Oh, this is going to be so fun. So we're going to discuss Strangers in Time, as I said. We're going to talk about your whole career, your oeuvre, your masterclass. And also, I'm going to steadily and slowly, and I think convincingly, build the case that you are the Tom Cruise of literature. I'll get to all that as time goes on. But first, there's a great anecdote about you, about how when you were a little kid, 8 years old, your mom gave you a notebook to write down stories. And you have credited your mother for sparking your interest in writing and storytelling. But really later she said she just gave you that notebook to keep you quiet because everybody needs a break. So is this story true?
It's very true. My mom also told me that, you had gotten on my last nerve, boy. That's the way it goes, but it worked out okay.
Well, it's so funny. I mean, like, the reason why I love that anecdote is because there is something that I think goes through all your work. There is always this kind of childlike curiosity and wonder with like the surface of the world. I always can feel that child in you kind of coming to the reader and saying, oh my God, you're not going to believe what I just found out,
That really is. If I have a superpower, it's that. I've always loved to tell stories. I think that's one reason I'm prolific. When I finish a novel, it's not like I say, oh, thank God that's done. I'm going to take 6 months off. That's where I'm at my worst, in between stories. So I've never lost that, and I don't worry about the money side of it, the reader side, the publishing side, the deadline side. I just sit down and I'm 8 years old again, and I'm just writing the stories I used to write. And it comes through in the pages. It makes everything better.
Yeah. So give us a thumbnail of Strangers in Time.
So it's set in 1944 in London, and a million books have been written about World War II. And I had to think long and hard about how I was going to make my book distinctive. And so I decided to just base it on three people coming together who, but for the war, never would have met, just because England back then certainly was a very class-oriented system. So you have a very poor lad from the East End, Charlie Matters. You have a very wealthy girl from the West End, Molly Wakefield. Roughly in the middle, you have a bookseller, Ignatius Oliver, in the Strand. And during the course of the novel, Charlie loses what little he has. Molly loses everything she has. And the three of them have to come together and unite to try to survive the war, when I don't think individually they would have had a chance. And I wanted to show that, for me, World War II has always been like the classic example of the totality of human experience. You had good versus evil and everything, every experience in the spectrum in between that. And it has a lot of lessons for us when we're going through dark times. It gives us hope that we can get through them. Challenging times when no one thought that we'd ever get out of it. And World War II was obviously a global struggle. We did get out of it. But if you're going to have to go through bad times, it's much better to go through them with people you can trust or rely on than going through it alone.
So I had Eric Larson on the show to talk about The Splendid and the Vile, which is his book about the Blitz. And, I think I coined a phrase on that interview, this phrase, joie de Blitz, which is just this idea that he really kind of documented in the book, which was that, the Nazis thought that the way to crush the will of the British was to just bomb the hell out of them. And in fact, it had the opposite effect. And I think people would love returning to this period in time, because it just showed not only the resiliency, but just kind of it made them even more difficult opponents to defeat. Why was that?
Well, I think that it did exactly that. And also, other countries took note of that. And also, like the United States, before Pearl Harbor, we were giving them some aid, but we weren't in the fight with them. But I think if you want to see something, an analogous situation right now, you can look at Ukraine. Everybody thought that Ukraine was, going to be defeated in a matter of days or weeks, and they weren't, and they fought back hard. And I think it's almost like when you push somebody against the wall and they can't go any farther, they start to push back. And all of a sudden, the right motivations come to bear. Like, I'm fighting for my life. I'm fighting for the life of my country. For them, I think the motivations are far higher than are for the people who are actually attacking them. So I love the fact that, during the Blitz, while all this horror, you can imagine, was going on all around them, the milk still got delivered. People still went to work. People, there was the scene in the novel where a bombed out church, there's a wedding still going on, so that was sort of like life still goes on. So I do think that, the Germans had it exactly wrong, as the Russians have it exactly wrong right now, that when you push people against the wall and they have nowhere else to go, they start to push back.
There was an incredible social media post from Zelensky this morning, where he was saying that people are asking me, why aren't I afraid that I'll make Russia more angry with this kind of secret spiderweb strike that we just did? And he said, you need to understand that every day they're killing our civilians, they're bombing us. So no, we are not afraid. And it was just the whole tone of the thing. I mean, it was sort of straight out of Churchill and World War II.
It was. And you also have the fact that you have a country invading another country for no good reason, only than their own enrichment. So obviously there's going to be that, for me at least, the stark contrast between good and evil are pretty much set in the Ukrainian conflict right now. The same in World War II.
Yeah. So I couldn't help but draw a parallel between this book and your very first book, in that they both start out with an act of theft by a kind of lovable rogue. What is it about David Baldacci and starting a book with the lovable thief?
Yeah, but benign thievery has gotten me very far in life as far as writing has gone. I love the gray in life. I don't really like to write about black and white. I've never met a perfect person. I've never met a totally imperfect person. So for me, interesting life lays along the margins between black and white. And so you have a thief who turns out to do something good. Then all of a sudden that's an interesting character because it makes them multifaceted. I don't want to read about somebody who's just only one piston in their engine. So whether it's Luther Whitney in Absolute Power being a burglar who actually has the highest principles of anybody in the novel, or Charlie Matters, who's stealing literally just so he can survive and his grandmother can survive. As I said early on in that novel, he doesn't steal from people who can't afford to lose stuff. He steals from people who have 4 spares for everything else. Right. And for him, that is his own set of principles, and he sticks to that. But it just makes them complicated characters.
Yeah. So this is an historical novel. You've written a few historical novels before, and I think you've got some more coming on the way. But by and large, you write contemporary thrillers. And I'm just wondering about the research, because I think, one thing, so here's my Tom Cruise thing. I mean, this Tom Cruise comparison is multi-layered, as you will see, but one of the things that you have in common with Tom Cruise is the attention to, your attention to rigorous research. I mean, you go out and you fire. If you're going to write about a gun, you fire that gun. If you're going to write about the Secret Service, you go on a walk with the Secret Service. You want to write about the Navy SEALs, you have just done it all. And that's very similar to Tom Cruise, who, of course, insists on doing his own stunts. And one question, though, I had about the research for this is that because it happened so long ago, I mean, I guess 80 years ago now, you couldn't really, probably, at least relatively, you couldn't do as much kind of seeing the actual thing, talking to the actual people. And I know that you have kind of talked out in the past, kind of especially in your MasterClass, about kind of Wikipedia research and, just kind of reading and then converting that into what you write in your book. You want to get out there and live it. So I guess my question for you on writing something historical is, how do you do the David Baldacci research thing?
Well, I've been to the UK more times than I can count, and I've got a lot of friends who live there. And every time that I've gone over, I always take a little notebook with me and I write things down. I talk to them about, the war. We passed by a street and that I've read about during the war, and I asked them about it, and they give me information about it. I read a ton of books. I have an archive box for every book that I write, and this one is like a massive because of all the books and other materials that I read. I also found that it was very helpful, much like the WPA did in this country during the Depression, to write, going out and interviewing people. They did something very similar in England during World War II, and I found this cache of letters online that chronicling people's experiences during the Blitz, and learned about their everyday lives, horrific things, but they sort of took it in stride. And that gave me a lot of fodder to sort of think out scenes that I wanted to build into this story. So what I tried to do was, and one other thing too, my father fought in World War II. He was in the Navy, and his sort of jaunt was he would go across the North Sea as part of a destroyer pack, guarding cargo ships that would go over to England and drop off war material. And 17 years old, he's on the bow of a ship on watch at 10 o'clock at night, and he's chained to the ship so that the seas won't throw him overboard. And when he would get to England, he would spend some time over there while his ship was getting ready to come back across the Atlantic. And he told me about some of the, stuff that happened during the course of the war. And even years ago, my father passed away quite a long time ago, but I remember all those stories, and that gave me motivation as well. So out of all of that, you sit down with your imagination and sort of take that, extrapolate it out, and try to build it into a cohesive story that would interest someone else. But here's the thing with research: you got to leave 99% of it out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you write a textbook and you write a flip book. A flip book is where a writer's done a lot of research. They don't want to take the time to integrate it. You find a spot, they go, they stick it in the book. The reader's reading, they hit those pages and they go flip, past that, and they go back to the story. So I always try to avoid flip books as I can.
Yeah, I guess so. That was another question that I had for you, is that, like, since so much had been written about the Blitz, like, what made you feel that, like, it needed the David Baldacci treatment? And I mean, I asked the same question to Eric Larson, and his answer was that he had discovered some kind of some source materials that hadn't been put out yet, and so he went into it that way. But for you as a fiction writer, what was the thing that you said, like, look, billions of words have been written about this, but I think there's an angle for me?
It was a humanistic angle only. I give you the atmosphere so you feel like you're in the Blitz during World War II and the years after that. I just wanted to show how war impacts people. War doesn't really care about people at all, except its only goal is to destroy them. My theme very much when I'm writing a book like this or a book like Calamity of Souls is trying to bring people together, trying to unite people. So that's why I wanted to bring three people who never would have met otherwise. War makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to. We need more unity. Let me just put it that way. In this world, we have far too much division now, and this is the way to show that even in extreme situations, people could come together, who may not agree on much, and find a common ground to move forward together in a positive way. Almost like a family. Which I thought was a very positive message in the middle of so much horror. That's the angle I wanted to tell. And I had that in my mind very early on in writing this novel. And that's what drove me from the first page to the last.
Absolutely. So I want to turn back now and just talk about your career. And I want to turn back to the beginning. I know that you were kind of in your early 30s when, you had You published your first book, Absolute Power, when you started writing it anyway. And at that time, you kind of, I've heard you describe yourself as somebody on the outside looking in. I mean, you were writing screenplays, short stories. It's so hard for us mere mortals to kind of imagine David Baldacci like being on the outside looking in. But just, I'm curious, like, a few questions about that time, because so many people are on the outside looking in. And for you, like, why did you, when you were on the outside looking in, why did you keep going? Why did you think like, I mean, I'm just going to keep getting rejected, short stories, screenplays. Nope, just going to keep going. What was it?
I think for me, it was, I had looked at what other writers had done, and they had gone through the same gauntlet that I was currently going through. It wasn't like, this is not where you have a phenom at age 16 that writes a best-selling novel, because so much of it is experience, maturity, and also going through rejection after rejection that pushes you to get better. I mean, my earlier work was rejected because it wasn't good enough. But if you really want to be a writer, it's almost like if you love writing, that transforms into body armor. And so when you get hit with a rejection, it stings for a little bit, but then the hurt goes away. If you're in it for the wrong reason, you just hate your day job and you want to go sell a book and the movie rights over a weekend, that rejection is going to be a mortal wound. It's going to kill you. You're dead. So for me, I had, before I wrote Absolute Power, I had written the screenplay in 1991 called Reverse Order. It was like 20 years before all the movies about Die Hard in the White House. I wrote Die Hard in the White House.
Oh, wow.
My agent in LA, I was working on a case up in actually in Long Island, and it was really hot. The coverage was great. Warner Brothers was looking at it, Paramount, Universal, everybody. And I got a call at midnight that night from them and said that Warner Brothers passed and everybody else got scared, so everybody passed. So it wasn't going to sell. There was not. And that was just like 15 years now I've been writing and really nothing to show for it. And I remember looking out the motel window, at Islip, New York, and thinking, maybe I'm not going to get the break, because writers need a break, no matter how good you are. And the right person has to see your material at the right time. Yeah. So I went back home and I was like, well, how the hell can you stop writing? This is so much a part of your life that you would have this void that I don't think I could survive it. So I thought, let me just try my hand at a novel. And my law office was near the White House. I would pass the White House a lot. And I'd read a lot of history about Camelot and all the trysts that Kennedy had. So I thought, what about a burglar who sees the president in a compromising situation because of his actions? A woman is killed. The Secret Service have to cover it up. The burglar has evidence. He's on the run. I can make that work. That sounds like an interesting story that I would love to go through and, walk that journey with them. So I spent 3 years writing Absolute Power, and then that really changed my life. I could have decided just the hell with it and just stopped. But then, I wouldn't be talking to you today if I had done that. So. But
tell me, specifically, why did you have that story idea and think this isn't a screenplay, it's a novel?
There was too much. I've adapted one of my own books for film. And so when you do that, the first question you have to ask is, what small part of the novel are you going to film? It has to be left out, including all the peripheral characters, the subplots and all that. You don't have enough time. So for me, in my mind, unspooling, I had the burglar, the president, the Secret Service, all the other indicia that would come along with those plots and subplots and peripheral characters. There was no way in the world I could make that into a 110-page screenplay. Yeah. And besides that, I had never attempted a novel before then, and I thought this is the holy grail of writing, the long form fiction. And I thought, if you're going to do it, this would be a great time to do it right now. And so I didn't have a time limit or how long it was going to take me to write. I was a full-time trial lawyer, and the hours were long. I was married. I had our first child at that time. So I thought, however long it takes me, it's going to take me. So it was 3 years.
And when were you writing? Were you writing in the morning, weekends, nights?
Anytime I had a spare moment, I would write on the metro. I would write early in the morning. I would write. Usually my preferred time was 10 at night until 2 in the morning. And I would come home, kiss my wife, have dinner, kiss the baby, and then go down my little cubby hole. And I know that sounds draconian, but that was some of the best times of my life because I was going down to my little hole to write things that I wanted to write, not what a partner or a client wanted me to write.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I look at the timing of that, I have to just kind of look at the early 90s and say there was another kind of dashing Southern lawyer around the early 90s who hit it big. Yes. The Firm, John Grisham's The Firm came out in 1991. The film version of that, starring Tom Cruise, no less, came out in 1993. I think you actually, if I'm doing the timing right, you actually started writing Absolute Power in 1991, the same year The Firm came out. Regardless, right around the early 90s, John Grisham's star is just going to the moon, and
Right.
here you are writing a novel. I'm just curious, like, did that influence you at all? Did you think, hey, look, this guy's doing it, I can do it?
Well, I certainly, and I've known John for about 25 years now, and
Yeah.
he's a good friend. I'm sure I was influenced by that because actually, his very first novel, A Time to Kill, which didn't sell well,
Yeah.
only sold incredibly well after The Firm came out, but that shows how resilient and he was just not going to stop either.
Yeah.
I do remember Scott Turow, who's also another good friend of mine and
Yeah.
an incredible writer, reading Presumed Innocent. I still remember where I was when I was reading Presumed Innocent in the late 80s and what an impact that book had on me as well. And I had never written a police procedural. Absolute Power was not really that, but it had a lot of police material in it because it was a criminal investigation. But I was influenced by both of them and a lot of other writers, who came before me.
Yeah, I just had Scott on the show a few months ago about his new book. But Absolute Power became a film starring Clint Eastwood, directed by Clint Eastwood. That screenplay was written by William Goldman. Now, William Goldman is a real hero of mine. I think he's a hero to a lot of people. Wrote Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Princess Bride, worked on Misery, All the President's Men. Just one of the real legends, not only as a screenwriter, but as a kind of like storyteller and theoretician of the screenwriting craft. Just give us an anecdote about talking to William Goldman. I don't know how much interaction you really had with him, but just talk about that. I mean, what a legend that guy is.
Yeah, so Bill and I spent quite a bit of time together. He came down to Virginia. We went around looking at some locations for the film. We're talking about the script. And he had been hired by Castle Rock before Eastwood was signed on. So he called me up one night. He said, I've got some great news for you. I have some terrific news, some terrible news for you. I said, okay, well, give me the great news. Clint Eastwood is assigned to star, direct, and produce. Warner Brothers is lighting. Absolute Power is going to be made. I was like, fantastic. What's the terrible news? He said, well, the terrible news is Clint Eastwood is assigned to star, direct, and produce the film. The book is pretty much gone because Clint wants to play the burglar, and Clint back then does not die in his films. And so time went on. His job was to figure out how to keep Eastwood alive. So Bill called me up months later, late at night, and he said, I can't figure out how to keep this son of a bitch alive. Do you want to? And I said, Bill, I spent 3 years of my life killing him. No, I don't want to do that. So they had to bring in another writer to do a polish and to figure that piece out. And then off to the races we went.
Wow. So one theory that you have about writing is you need a big opening. I mean, definitely Absolute Power has a big opening. I think I've read that you wrote a letter to the agents when you tried to get an agent, and you said, if you read the first page of this book, I guarantee you will not be able to stop reading. And indeed, it's a great first page. It's an incredible opening. But I just kind of want to talk more broadly about this idea of big openings in your book. Why is it important? And what makes it a big opening? Like what is the thing that makes you think, now that's a big opening?
It really has so much to do with, you have to put on your psychologist hat and understand the reaction to the reader of the material you put forth. So it has three different uses to it. One, a big opening is where something dramatic happens, but it's unexpected by the reader. You have to shake the reader out of their current sense of, I'm going to be able to figure this book out pretty early on. I'm going to be comfortable while I'm reading it. Nothing's really going to gobsmack me because I read 1 million of these books. So if you can rip them out of that comfort zone, then they're going to stop trying to second guess you. They're going to sit back and enjoy the ride. Secondly, a lot of writers that I know, they always complain, I've written 100 pages. Now I don't know where to go with it. I just run out of steam. And my take is, if you build into those first 50 or so pages all the feeder lines you need to write the complete novel, which I try to do with every book, then you're never going to run into that problem. So you really want to knock the reader off their game, and at the same time set up a fail-safe that you're never going to have to say at 100 pages, where the hell do I go now?
Yeah.
Because you can build into those early pages pretty much all the material you're going to need. I'm not saying you have twists and turns, you can come later in different characters and all that, but the fundamental foundation that you need to drive a 400-page novel is going to be there.
But hold on. I've heard you say also that you don't really outline, and you just kind of have a big idea, and you sort of try to like put Houdini in a trap and see if he can get out. And so one of the questions I had about that is, the way you were just speaking a moment ago, it sounded like, you're putting in all these kind of breadcrumbs that will like these things that will pay off later. But my impression of your writing style and your process is that actually you just think of like a crazy impossible situation to start with and then go from there. Is that right?
Yeah, but even when I lay the breadcrumbs, I have no idea at that point where they're going to go, and I don't want to know.
Okay.
I did an Amos Decker Memory Man,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was The Long Shadows, and it was a murder. Two people were murdered in the same house, one downstairs, one upstairs. They were murdered in very different fashion, and come to find out that they were killed by different people at different times.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I had enough ammunition to write that entire novel just based off that in one investigation from that one opening where you saw the two bodies. But I had no idea where it was going to go. I had no idea what those trails were going to be, where Decker was going to go, who was going to run into. But that's okay. That stuff can be figured out later. And here's the reason why I don't want to outline the books. One, I never end up using the outlines. I just throw them away because it's like, how can I write an outline about a character I haven't met on a page yet? I have no idea how they're going to react to stuff. And I give this analogy too. Writing an outline is like Tom Brady in practice. Nobody's going to lay a hand on the guy. And he's not going to be at that same level of urgency. But if you're in a game and 11 guys on the other side of the ball want to kill you, you're going to be sharper, focused. Your synapses are going to be firing off. You're going to see the entire field, all the other 21 players in that field, because it matters. And the decisions you make in that moment matter. So I like to write in the trenches where what I'm going to write, I can't kick the can down the road. There is no road to kick the can down. I am on the road. And so the decision I have to make, I make at a higher level than I ever would in an outline.
Well, this begs the question, you're putting out an average of like 2 books a year if you look back at your whole career. The question is, have you ever kind of created a situation that you just can't find your way out of? and so you just have to give up on the book.
It's happened to me a couple of times. And one was a book I wrote called Last Man Standing, which was my longest book. And I'd been writing the book when a very close family member was going through some terrible times. And as a former lawyer, I had a lot to help with that because there was some legal issues involved. And when I turned the draft in, everybody that I counted on reading it, agent, editor, and all that, they were like, "This is not you. Something's weird. Something's off with this book." That was in March, and I was supposed to really deliver the book in like April, May. So I went back to the drawing board. I cut 120,000 words out of the novel. I had 10,000 words left, and I got my head focused, and I wrote another 100,000 words in like 2 months and turned the book back in. And that was a lesson to me that when you sit down to write, don't be distracted. When you sit down to write, the only thing that exists in the entire universe is a story in front of you. And if you allow outside influences that shouldn't be there, it's like you're contaminating your own creative process. So I never want to do that again. And also, the other thing I do that I did too much of when I was a younger writer, I would think of an idea and sit down and just roll with it. Now I let it percolate. I'm right in the middle of that right now. I'm percolating with an idea. I'm writing notes down where I want this story to be and what it could be and the options that I have. I walk around, I take long walks, I go listen to some music, I go do other stuff, but to let it just roam in my mind. Is this worthy of a next novel? Is this something I want to spend my life with for the next however many months it takes me to write this? Because I don't want it to be a drudge. If it ends up being a drudge, I'm going to run out of creative gas and it's going to be shitty and I'm going to be upset and nobody's going to be happy about that. So I take more time now from the onset to figure that, like, is this really what you want to do? Because, I'm getting up there in age. I've only got a few more, shots at this. And
say it ain't so, David. Come on. Now, listen, hold on. So I want to go back to this kind of, you thinking about your next book. So first of all, are there like multiple books that you're thinking of? Like, so you're thinking you maybe got like 3 options and then you pick among them, or is it just always one book for your next book that you're thinking?
Yeah, this what I'm mulling over will be, options for the one book that I want to write next. I do have to say though, this last year, I wrote a new series, a thriller series set in contemporary times, simultaneously with an Aloysius Archer series. He's a gumshoe set in the 1950s in LA. And I went back and forth, 2 weeks on the contemporary, 2 weeks back in 1958. I did not know how that was going to pan out, quite frankly. It's just I wanted to try something different. And it worked out really, really well. I think because when you get sort of stuck or mired in something on one book, having another creative project to turn to that sort of, refreshes your mind, it's not a bad thing. So that's worked pretty well.
Is there, if you look at all the books that you write, all the different series you have, historical, contemporary, YA, everything, is there a kind of essential David Baldacci story, the kind of the thread that ties it all together, that each story at least has this one element?
I think that every book that I probably has ever written, it involves human beings failing on a grand scale. And then what's really interesting in the story is how they pick themselves back up. And I think pretty much every novel that I've written has had elements of that one conundrum that we all go through in life. And why I like to do that is because I like to have themes that are universal to everyone. I growing up, I would love to read books that I could relate to, and where some of the characters went through some of the same issues and challenges and decisions they had to make that I would have to make in my life, because it makes it so relatable and personal. It's amazing how books can be personal to millions of people. And it's quite an ambitious undertaking, but it's also very special, and that's why books are very unique. They're sui generis for that regard, because I've always said that a book is never finished until the last reader reads it. Because no one, everybody gives their own, imprint upon that story and takes away something different. 1,000 people could read the same book and come in with 1,000 reasons of why they liked it.
I love that, man. I don't know, in all the hundreds of episodes I've done, I don't know if I've ever said somebody ties all their work together with this idea of like there's failure at the center of it. But I mean, what is more relatable than that? I mean, everybody has failed. And actually, it makes you quite different than Tom Cruise, because often I feel like Tom Cruise doesn't fail enough in his movies. All right, so I want to talk about like you as an author and kind of like the way that you work, and in some ways like the entire industry that at this point in your life has been built around you. I mean, one thing that like just immediately comes across, I was joking with David in the green room folks about how like he actually beat me to the green room. Like we're supposed to be there at 1:45. Like he was there. I got there at like 1:45 and 30 seconds, and he was there, of course, because it's David Baldacci. And I just think like I knew it would be that way, because you are just such a kind of, blue collar, on time, under budget, nailing, your editor gets you notes, you turn them around in 4 days. I mean, you turn your manuscript in ahead of time. Just talk about this. And I kind of, what's interesting to me is that, there's this whole idea of a writer too. I mean, I think a romantic idea in society of kind of like, La Boheme, and like, living in a garret in Paris and like drinking absinthe, and like, the Edgar Allan Poe dying in a gutter thing. I mean, this is just, your whole ethos just could not be more different than that. Talk about that.
I am a very much a lunch pail kind of writer, where I sit and I do the work, one, because I enjoy it, but two, because I feel a responsibility as well. You're right. Industries are built around writers, and I want the world to be filled with books and readers. The more we have, the better world we're going to have. So I can support that ecosystem. I do. And I take my obligations, very seriously. I tell, writers coming up, you can demand a lot of your publisher, and you should, but don't be surprised when your publisher demands a lot of you too. It's a partnership. You want to build this great thing together. So I've always gotten there early. I've always worked hard. I've never missed a deadline, because I respect myself and I respect the people I'm dealing with too. And I don't want to disappoint them or myself. And I want to turn out the best book and story that I can every single time. And that takes a lot of work. Discipline is something I learned, early on in life. I grew up very blue collar in the old, Confederacy capital in Richmond, Virginia. I had a paper route when I was a kid. I got up at 3:00 every morning from the age of 12 until I was 18. And it just, that ethos was sort of built into me. My parents were both blue collar people, and, you're just supposed to work hard. There was no other way around it. But it's a business, and it's really difficult, but you have to do this. The creative side should bring you great happiness, and also frustration. It's not easy writing a book. But there should be a happiness component to it. The business side of it is the business side of it. You need to hit your cues every time. And if you've told people you're going to do something in a certain way and at a certain time, you better deliver it, unless you have a really good explanation why you can't do it that way. And I like to look at myself as being very reliable on that score, because it makes the process smoother for everyone.
It's really interesting. In your masterclass, you were talking about how, you go around the world to these different publishers and all of these dozens of countries that publish you, and you kind of have personal relationships. And it's not only are you like meeting these people, but you are kind of nurturing those relationships. And, you made this comment that like, that people are depending on your book being good, like people's livelihoods. Like if you don't write a good book and your career goes down the tubes, there's lots of people all over the world who would lose their job or have to find something different to do because they're depending on you. And honestly, I come from the business world myself, and I've never heard a writer speak in that way about writing. And it speaks mainly to just kind of how successful you have been, but it's just, you sound like a CEO who's running a business. And I just found it striking.
Yeah, you really, and again, coming from a legal background, I dealt with a lot of businesses. I represented a lot of clients who had businesses both big and small. And I saw how they ran their organizations. And I know that it's important. I've met, I've met many of my publishers and the people who work for those publishers. When I was in Australia, New Zealand over the holidays, I met with the teams in both countries, and they're friends of mine. And I understand that if I'm 20% of their entire business for the year, then that's an obligation and responsibility that I have. And I try to turn that into creative energy on the other side as well. It's not the only reason I write, but it is one of the reasons why I write at this point in my career too, because I like them. And I tell young writers coming up, keep your foreign rights. Don't sell everything world rights to your American publisher, because you're always going to have that buffer wall. And for me, getting to know, all these other publishers and the wonderful people who work there, it's been one of the greatest thrills of my life as a writer. I just learned today that Strangers in Time, World War II, they just sold the rights. Didn't think they were going to be able to sell the rights to this. They sold it in Germany.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
which was terrific, And so I take that responsibility very seriously, because these are my friends. These are people that I really care about.
And let me just kind of make an unscripted comment here that I just want to say thank you, David, because I am an author whose first book just came out. And I once read a statistic that, and I can't verify this, but the statistic was something along these lines. And it's shocking when you say it, but 10 writers in the whole world make 80% of the revenue in publishing. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but it sounds like it could be accurate. And certainly you would be one of those 10 individuals. And the basic idea, as everybody who looks at publishing knows, is that it's a kind of, it's a hits business. And it's like, there's a few people at the top who people love and just buy, millions of copies every time. And then there's a whole kind of farm system at the bottom, which includes people like me who are just trying to build their careers and trying to get that break. But I just want to say, like, if it weren't for you, and people like Stephen King and John Grisham and Colleen Hoover, there wouldn't be a business for me to join the farm team. So thank you for that.
No, and I talk all the time when I'm traveling and doing speaking engagements about the new voices in the writing world that we desperately need. I write a certain number of stories with a certain perspective. There are lots of other perspectives out there, marginalized perspectives that should be heard and need to be heard. And so we need to have writers who represent all of us. And I constantly imploring my publishers to take chances on writers who can build terrific careers if given enough support. And that's also why, during my masterclass, when I talk to aspiring writers who have one or two books, to let them know that, you can build something really special and demand a lot of your publisher. But again, let your publisher demand a lot of you. And don't ever abdicate your role. No one will ever care more about your career than you. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to wake up 10 books in 10 years from now and wonder why my sales are declining and what's been happening with my career, because you pawned it off on somebody else who made bad decisions on your behalf. I'm not saying micromanage, but one, be aware of how the publishing world works and the industry works and how books are sold and how books are made. And two, understand that building relationships and networking and going out to bookstores, and if you do and strike up friendships, guess what? They're going to hand sell the crap out of your books, and that's going to help you. When Absolute Power came out, it felt like I'd visited every bookstore in America. But I was thrilled to do it because, again, I never thought I'd have opportunity to have a book that was published. Yeah. So for me, it was like, this is my payback time. This is where I need to go out and thank everybody else.
Awesome. Another big topic in the news right now is AI. It's extremely controversial in publishing. And, I just, for example, was in ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT to write Little Red Riding Hood in the style of David Baldacci. And it was sort of funny. It was like, she's a secret agent and she has to deliver a package to grandma, all this stuff. And, I did it for my own work. It's kind of a strange experience, especially when you see ChatGPT imitating your own literary voice. But certainly it's controversial in publishing because, you now have publishers saying that, there's one publisher who said they're going to try to publish like 8,000 AI written books next year. There's going to be a flood in the market, and it's particularly going to hit, or so they think, genre writers more than, say, literary fiction. I'm just curious what your take is on AI. Do you ever use it? Do you think about it? Do you worry about it?
I worry about it. I'm one of the 19 named plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft AI. Me, John Grisham, Scott Turow, George R. R. Martin, Jodi Picoult, and a bunch of unnamed plaintiffs as well. They took, I think, 48 of my novels without compensation or permission and fed it into the machine learning platforms. There are lots of wonderful things that AI can do. I do not think they should be within 10,000 miles of the creative world, because that's what human beings can do. And once you allow software platforms to replace humans in that aspect, then there's nothing that they will not be able to replace in the future. I don't want every stage play, every film, every piece of music, every book that I'm exposed to have been written by a non-human. But that's sort of where we are. I mean, if you go on Amazon now, I think they have to tell you whether the book was written by a human or an AI platform. Wow. And I think they're having to limit the number of books that writers can publish in a day or in a week. Because with AI, you can publish 20 books a day if you wanted to and sell them for a buck. And that destroys not only careers at my level, but it destroys people trying to build their careers. How do you compete against that? So I think it's a disservice to the entire industry to all of a sudden say, let's just go to AI. Same, my writer friends out in LA, that was one of the big controversies with the last contract. The studios wanted to have, fire the writers, bring in AI to do all the first drafts, have one human being to polish it, and there you go. And then go onto the screen. That is not where we're going to go as a human race, I don't think. But there are other people out there who think it's going to be perfectly fine. I remember one guy who's sort of spearheading that. They asked him, do you think that AI can be an existential threat to humankind? He goes, absolutely, it can be. He said, but I think I'm going to get it right. And I'm like, well, who made you God?
Right. Yeah. There's some stories I've seen recently. There was a story where one of the chatbots named Claude, it's a kind of well-known one, attempted to blackmail attempted to blackmail somebody instead of getting shut down. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about how already AI is rewriting its own code to avoid being shut down. I mean, the future is here, and it seems like it might already be out of control, actually.
Oh, I think it is already out of control. And again, I tell people, guess what? I've seen the movies and I've read the books, and this is how it ends. The only difference is it's real life now. And for what? Because these people think they can make trillions of dollars. Well, good luck trying to spend the trillions of dollars when your AI platform controls you.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so let's move back to I want to do kind of a lightning round here of just some writerly type questions. So first, give me your coolest ever reader interaction. You have met, presidents, people all over the world. People love it. Just give me one amazing experience you had meeting a reader or getting feedback from a reader.
I was doing a book signing, and this young woman was in line, and she came up and said, I have a very special inscription request. I said, okay. I've signed lots of strange things. And she goes, okay, my name is Amy, and the person I want you to write it to is Tom. And Tom's asked me to marry him 3 times. She didn't tell me, but she told Tom on those 3 occasions. I only assumed she said no. So she said, here's what I want you to write to Tom. Amy loves you with all of her heart. Amy would love to share her life with yours. Amy accepts your proposal of marriage.
Oh.
Then Amy said, and whatever else you want to write.
Hope you enjoy the book.
Yeah, I know. Great. Have a nice life, Tom.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I got into the groove of it. And I wrote like 3 pages.
Oh,
I wrote 3 pages. Then Amy and I said, "You tell Tom he's one hell of a lucky guy." And she walks off. She's laughing, she's
oh.
crying, and then I started to worry because I was like, "Oh my God, I hope she's as wonderful as I wrote that she was." Because otherwise, that guy's coming for me.
Oh my God, like sign a waiver. I accept no responsibility. That's amazing. All right, give me this one. Coolest writing gig you've done. You do so much public speaking. Like, what's the coolest place you were in or reading that you did?
Well, let me tell you this story because it has to do with my kids who, as a writer, kids don't know how to deal with that. Okay, my dad's around. My daughter never wanted me to go to Parents' Career Day at school when she was in elementary school because all she'd ever seen me do was write my name in books. And she said, "Dad, you can't come to school." And I said, "Why not?" Because they don't like you to write in the books. So I never went to Parents' Career Day because my daughter thought that was my job. So the first time I became friends with a guy named David Heyman. We were working on a TV series for the Camel Club. This was years ago. And you don't know David Heyman's name, most people don't, but he produced all the Harry Potter films.
Oh, okay.
So David knew we were traveling over to England I was doing some work and also holiday. The kids were coming with me. So he said, "Come on up to the studio outside of London. We're filming the Half-Blood Prince. Bring your family." So my kids went up with us. And so they're climbing all over the stuff in the room requirement. They went to 4 Privet Drive. They went to the Quidditch pitch. They're putting on their sorting hat. And all this great stuff, all day. And they met some of the stars. And so as we were going back to London, I remember my daughter, she's like 15. She's in her 30s now. She looked back at me. She goes, "Dad, you're pretty damn cool." I was like, I will take that,
Oh my God.
So that was the one that, I don't know, that touched me,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
It really got me. Yep.
It is. I have 4 kids myself. It's really hard to make them even turn their head and look at a thing that you're doing. All right, on with the lightning round. What, above all, makes you keep reading a book, even a book that's maybe flawed in other ways, but if it has this, you will keep going?
If it has at least one character who I'm unsure about. I think that I figured it out, but I'm not. And again, this goes back to my mark of where you need to take the power away from the reader early on and let them know that they're not going to be in control of the story, you are. And how you do that is you surprise them 3 times in a row, and all of a sudden they just sit back and, loosen the seatbelt and grab a drink, and they're going to go for the ride. So for me, if I don't feel like I've got everything figured out and there's something hanging out there that's a mystery to me, then I will hang in there to find out if I'm right or wrong about it. And also because I care deeply about characters in the book that I read. Look, as a writer, you can't relate to or get a reader to relate to a plot. You can get a reader to relate and connect with on a visceral level with a character. Yeah. And that's why books need to be character driven for the most part. I can write a wonderful plot. If I don't make you care about the characters, then you're not going to care about the story. And you're really probably halfway through, you're going to hope they all die. So that's why you get to build these characters. So if there's a character in there that I'm really unsure of still, I'm going to hang in there.
Okay. Conversely, what is the thing that even if the book has maybe many other commendable qualities, you will stop reading if the author does this?
If the author writes to hear themselves write, where they could have said it in 10, and for some extraordinary reason, they chose to do it with 500 words. For me, language is not the be all to end all. The greatest political speech ever written in this country was the Gettysburg Address.
Yeah.
It was only 360 words long. Lincoln took 2 minutes to read it at Gettysburg. The congressman who spoke before him spoke for 2.5 hours. I dare anyone to identify that man or what he wrote. He spoke about. Nobody remembers him. So for me, economy of words, it's much harder to say something extraordinary in 10 words than it is to say something extraordinary in 100 words, because by every word you add, you're diluting the power of the message you want to come across. Yeah. So in a 400-page novel, it's so tempting to cruise and to fudge and just let things ride a little bit and not be as, merciless in, the language that you choose. That's why I always encourage writers who first starting out to start writing short stories. I wrote short stories for over a decade. Short stories are like any other writing. They have dialogue and character and plot and narrative and all the other stuff, but there's no place to hide.
Yeah.
I can't cruise in a short story that only has 3,000 words. There's no place for me to be, add an extra 4,000 words. You have to be very incisive with what you write about. And so for me, if the language is flowery and the words are just for the writer so they can hear themselves and their vocabulary, that's a big turnoff for me.
Super quick. I've always been curious about this. Like, so you're somebody who's writing kind of thriller, action, excitement. Short stories almost, even though there's no written rule about this, always seem to be quieter, psychological, domestic. Were you also writing like action short stories, or like?
I did both.
Okay.
I did both. It's harder. Absolutely. It's harder to do that. But that's the great thing about short stories. You can pick any genre you want and fit into the framework of a short story if you work hard enough at it. And that's why it's such really good training ground for longer form fiction. Because if you don't have that, that foundational skill of putting a narrative together in 3,000 words, it's going to be really difficult to put it together in 100,000 words.
Yeah. Okay, a few more lightning round questions. What's a skill that another writer has that you are jealous of?
I'm jealous of writers who can write about really substantive things, serious issues. Take like a John Irving or a Mark Twain, and add incredible humor. Can make someone laugh out loud in the middle of something that's very serious going on. I might have done that a few times in my career, but it's really incredibly difficult to do. Yeah. And I'm jealous of people to make it look effortless.
Yeah.
And luckily there are very few, so I'm not jealous of too many people. But there are some out there for sure.
What do you think is the quality that you have that other people might be jealous of? Like something that just comes so easily to David Baldacci?
I think that, I look back at all the things I've written, probably just the diversity of the stories that I've told, and also the number of series characters that I've created. I probably have 7 or 8 or 9 series going now that I care deeply about. I've written a lot of books about each of them. Probably, and having talked to other writers, they have brought that up from time to time that, they might have one series and that's all they have, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There have been lots of great series that only have one set of characters in them. But I guess I think that's also one reason why I've written as many novels as I've written, because I find a new character that will drive a new series, and it's like I'm reborn again. So everything is brand new again. I'm a tabula rasa, and here we go again. And everything is firing. The creative spark is firing. My gas tank is full, and I'm off and running like this is my first time ever. And that it's just a joyous feeling.
Beautiful. At the end of your MasterClass, you had this wonderful sentiment that you express, and I just want to read a quote from it. You said, "Writers change the world. Books change the world. Everyone is waiting for that next book that people will read and say, my God, this is a brilliant piece that makes me examine my life and what the world should be." So at first, I just want to say, like, I think that is like one of the things that pulls me on. It's like, even if, something that you're working on doesn't quite work out or work out in the way that you want, you're always just like, but it just seems just out of reach that I'm going to write the book, the book that people just have to read and can't stop talking about. It's just such an exciting thing to me that's kind of holy grail of like writing the book. But I wanted to ask you, you said books can change the world. Do you feel like your books have changed the world? Do you feel like, or you've written a book that changed the world?
Well, I think that every book that I've written has attempted to do something like that, because in every book that I've written, I always address something that I feel very strongly about. I don't get as high up on my soapbox as I used to, when I would get sometimes overly so, but it's still always there, because what drives me in writing stories is I have something to say about something that I think matters, and thus other people should consider it at least to see if it might matter in their lives too. And in the whole universe of all of us living collectively together, we make collective decisions that are going to impact other people. I grew up at the tail end of Jim Crow in Richmond, Virginia, with a very ethnic last name. I was an outsider from day one there. I grew up surrounded by racists and racism. The world, is told to me, was very black and very white. And the only thing that saved me was that I went to the library, worked with my brother and sister, and I checked out as many books as I possibly could. That changed the entire trajectory, not just of my life, but also of the human being that I am. I could have easily turned out to be as racist as all the people I grew up with. But I've always considered the books are like body armor against bigotry, the BBB, because Mark Twain used to say that travel is fatal to prejudice. And he meant that if you go to see where people live, you'll find out that they're just like you. And that breaks down the boogeyman theory of the other. And I like to think that through books, anybody has the opportunity to travel the world without a plane ticket or a passport. If you do that, then all of a sudden the world is going to be a much better place, because what books teach us above all else, because if you think about it, if you're a diligent reader, you will meet more people on the pages than you ever will in real life. And you go to places in books that you can't go to in real life, like the past and the future, which provides incredibly important context. But what books teach all of us is empathy. And I have always considered empathy the greatest human attribute. Why? Because it leads to all the best of us in humankind. Empathy leads to everything else, including love. Conversely, the lack of empathy leads to things like cruelty, mean-spiritedness, and wanting to divide people and not unite them. So that's why it was so important for me. And I like to think that in every book, at least I've attempted, to sort of change people's ideas and perspectives. And some of the reader feedback I've gotten, sometimes it works, sometimes not. Even when I've got stuff back that people say, I hated this because you did this and this and this. And I'm like, I'm really glad, because any book that can elicit a visceral response from someone has sort of done what I wanted it to do, which is to make people think.
Wonderful sentiment. Folks, the book is Strangers in Time. It's one of more than 50 David Baldacci books. I would recommend just going all the way back to Absolute Power and just starting there, and then just reading on through and opening your mind to the wonderful stories and imagination and excitement and thrills of David Baldacci's entire body of work. David, we're almost out of time here, but I just have one last question for you. Imagine that. Now, look, I am, God willing, you're going to have like another 2 or 3 decades writing books and everything. But just imagine, because sometimes people say Lifetime Achievement Awards are for kind of the old folks. I hope your Lifetime Achievement Award comes 40 years from now. But imagine that night you're getting a big Lifetime Achievement Award, and somebody gets up there and gives a toast to you and says, "Thank God for David Baldacci. There's a writer who really knew how to." What would you want them to say?
I would want them to say that, he's a writer who can make fiction seem like the realest of real life. And when I'm writing a book, all I want to do is take the reader, perch them on the shoulders of my characters, and let them ride the ride along with the people that I've created. And when you can combine a real person with an imaginary one, something really special and marvelous can happen. And that can change someone's life, because for the most part, they're never going to meet someone like I can create in a book in real life. They're just not. And when you meet somebody like that can impress upon you, all I want is I write books that make people want to pick up other books. If I can do that, I've done my job.
Beautiful stuff. All right, folks. Once again, the book is called Strangers in Time. We put links to buy it in the chat. David, this has been such a pleasure. Not only a great writer, but such a mensch, such a supporter of the literary industry, kind of in so many ways, both kind of your leadership and your great writing. It's just we're all very grateful that you're out there, David.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I always love talking about books and writing.
All right, folks. We'll see you next week on Thoughtful Bro. Thanks to everybody who joined, and we'll see you soon.